So glad to see you guys here. And I just want to say, for a really long time, people have believed that reading and IQ were completely related, and that if a child had a low IQ, that a child couldn't learn to read. So I'm going to be sharing with you today what my thoughts are about this. How did we get to this point where people really believe that this is true and all of that great stuff? And while you guys are here, I'm so glad just to welcome you guys. We've got Natalie in the house and we have Beth in the house. So you guys, if you are joining us live, tell us who you are, where you're from. I would love to be able to personally welcome you into this call. Now, it used to honestly be believed, you guys, that IQ would determine how well a child could read. But today I really am going to blow this myth away. So there are many teachers, there's special education teachers, administrators. They actually use IQ to determine if a student is going to be able to qualify for services. So it's easy to see why parents and tutors, they also think that IQ is going to determine if a student can be taught certain skills. Now, last week I shared with you one of my students that she was not learning to read inside of the particular class I was teaching her. It was the Success for All reading program. She really wasn't progressing. Like the other students in the class, they seemed to be making some progress, and this one student was making zero progress. I couldn't show any data that showed that she was increasing. And so I had talked with the special ed teachers and I had said, hey, this program's not working for her. Is there a way that we could have her go into into the Wilson class or another class that's going to be really effective for her? Because at that point I was a second year teacher. I honestly didn't know a lot about reading. And so I was really nervous for this child. And as soon as I brought this up to the special ed teacher, she said to me, her IQ is too low. She can't be admitted into that class. And I thought, wait, are you kidding me? So we leave her in my class where she's making no progress. She was a really good kid. There was no reason for me to want to pawn her off on somebody else. But based off the curriculum the school was having me teach, she wasn't making progress. So I was really, really concerned for her and what was going to happen for her. But, I remember this one teacher saying to me, she said, Joanne, if this girl goes into our class, she may make some progress, but she's going to flatline and not be able to increase anymore. And I was like, wait, you're already determining whether she could be successful or not before you've even actually given her a chance to do that. This is just absolutely to me, it's just crazy. And Natalie said here, she did a blog about the IQ test and talking about multiple intelligences and all of that. Great. If you could share your link, Natalie, that would be fantastic. We'd love to be able to read that one. So awesome. We've got Darla in the house. Hello, hello, hello. And Lynn Wilson. And we're chatting here all about IQ and reading. So I was actually really interested. I wanted to do some more research and be able to see, okay, is this true? That if a kid that has a low IQ, maybe will make a little bit of progress and then they are going to flatline. So I did end up finding a article. It was called Scientifically Based Reading Instruction. Is it effective for students with below average IQs? So it's a longitudinal randomized control that investigated the effectiveness of scientifically based reading instruction for students with IQs from 40 to 80. It included students with intellectual disability, and students were randomly assigned, so into treatment and contrast groups. Students in the treatment group, they received an intervention instruction daily in small groups of 1 to 4 for approximately 40 to 50 minutes for 1 to 4 academic years. And on average, students in the treatment group, they made significantly greater progress than students in the contrast group on nearly all language and literacy measures. So the results demonstrate the ability of students with low IQs, including students with mild to moderate intellectual disabilities, to learn basic reading skills when provided appropriate, comprehensive reading instruction for an extended period of time. And I think this is where like RTI came into effect, because a lot of people in the school system, what they used to do is they would say, okay, so this kid's not like learning at the current class. What are some things that you're trying, right? So RTI, responsive intervention, was like, okay, if a child's not doing well in a class, before you start getting them tested and all of that stuff, try some kind of an intervention with them first before you just place them into special ed program, right? And I think this is important. Like in our school, we specifically had like different reading programs for different types of students. So that was something that we had going for us. But at the same time, in order to get into certain programs, you had to have like a certain IQ level, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. But the girl did end up, they did finally, like I just pushed and pushed and pushed. They finally took her into the class and she was making results and she learned to read. And so like I was really excited that there was this possibility that kids with a lower IQ absolutely can learn how to read. Now, you know what? In the classroom, I know that teachers have a lot of expectations that are thrown at them, right? So classroom teachers, they support 25 to 30 students on average here in the US. But guess what? Special education teachers, they also have 25 to 30 students on their roster as well. And you know, I wanted to kind of back this up because I was like, at first I was like, I'm pretty sure that like the special ed teachers, they have like the same amount as like a classroom teacher, except that they're expected to meet the needs of every individual student. So I backed this up. I asked Kathy Cousino, who's one of our coaches at the Online Tutor Coach here, and she said that she had 28 students. So it was right in that range that I was thinking. So obviously the main thing is that everyone wants these kids to learn, right? Teachers are given curriculums, and then they have to figure out ways to modify the curriculum to meet the needs of each student. This is an extremely difficult thing to do in our current system, isn't it? It becomes easier over time to kind of develop the belief that kids with certain IQs will struggle with learning because we see it over and over again, right? So that which we experience, we just start applying into generalizations. But what begins to happen is really this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So over time, teachers begin to put kids into categories. So these are the smart kids. These are the average kids. These are the kids that need a ton of extra support, which in some teachers' minds means no matter what I do, this group of kids over here is still going to struggle. So learning is never going to become easy and therefore I can't really help them is the mindset that begins to develop. They begin to think, well, the other 24 to 29 students in my classroom, they also need my attention, right? And so it makes us feel better if there's kind of like this external reason that's outside of us as to why the student is not succeeding. And some teachers will begin to blame students' intelligence, the upbringing of the child, poor choices a child makes. And this is a slippery slope, you guys. Oftentimes, it takes that one teacher who really does believe in you to make a difference, doesn't it? I mean, would others believe in you? What you believe, these things shape your self-concept. As much as we want to believe that all teachers will shape a positive self-concept for their students, we all know that they all don't. They'll use where the child lives, who the siblings are, and their own past failures with certain kids to determine the future success of a child. But this causes harm to the child and it doesn't set them up for success. I'm gonna go a little bit back into even just like how, Natalie, the entire like school system was even created, here in the US. I'm not sure if it's like similar in the UK as it is over here. But I'm going to give you guys an example. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of like Jim Quick. So when Jim Quick was 9 years old, he actually overheard his teacher say that was the kid with the broken brain. And he's not sure, like, did they think maybe he wasn't paying attention or he simply wasn't smart enough? But here were the words that he will never forget. That's him. That's the boy with the broken brain. So as the words of adults, he said, become the internal dialogue of children, Jim went on to suffer for many years at school, believing exactly what his teacher had said about him. And the key word here is he believed. So what we truly believe about ourselves, of course, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And the light bulb moment for Jim came suddenly with this. He began thinking, your brain is a supercomputer, and your self-talk is the program it runs. We have these supercomputers built into our brain. It can be reprogrammed. It is amazing. The power of the mind, you guys, is astounding. So when we say things to ourselves like, oh, I have a low IQ, or I'm not smart enough, our brain automatically follows these instructions. But mental sharpness doesn't have to be something you just inherently have. It can be something you do, something you train. All kids have the ability to learn. We just need to tap into each kid's inner genius, right? But schools often think about learning and IQ like shoe size. So the more that a child can learn, I want you to think about shoe size for a second here. So can you ever increase the size of your foot? No, you can't. But students' ability to learn can't be judged in a shoe size methodology, right? Kids can learn skills to remember, to retain, to apply. We have this amazing supercomputer that's built inside of us. So I wonder if teachers have ever considered this. The more that a child can learn, the more that the child will be able to earn later on in life. So when we limit a child to a number like an IQ, we are doing so much harm to them. We're limiting how much money that they're even going to be able to make later in life. And oftentimes money can determine the quality of life that you have, right? Because if you don't have money, you're going to struggle with paying, any medical bills that you have, or being able to, own a home versus rent a home, be able to buy the things that you need without having to, go towards government assistance, right? Like all of these things, we have no idea as teachers how much they impact our students' lives. And it's really, really important stuff. This is a really important thing to really be thinking about. Now, I believe that our educational system is not set up properly. You may agree, you may disagree with this, but I'm just going to share what it's like here in the United States. It was created in the United States when we were an industrial market, not the information at a fingertip world that we live in today. Okay. Horace Mann actually copied this model after visiting Prussia in 1843. So Horace Mann's free school movement stemmed less from a belief in the economic and moral imperative of education for all children, and more from a desire to simply create a tolerant, civilized society. So Mann grew up in my home state of Massachusetts during the early part of the 19th century, where religious tension between Protestants and Catholics dominated public life. So parochial schools, in his view, only reinforced these divisions. The Prussian model, on the other hand, was designed to build a common sense of national identity. That's probably why we say the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning, right? So applied back home, Mann thought large groups of students learning together would help kind of blur the division between and among religious groups and establish a more unified and egalitarian society. And as the model became an American blueprint, Mann's vision ultimately became the foundation for our national system of schooling. So his vision also made sense for the industrial age that we lived in at the time. The factory line was simply the most efficient way to kind of scale production in general, and the analog factory model classroom was the most sensible way to rapidly scale a system for schools. Factories weren't designed to support personalization. Neither were schools. So this is why we struggle today with personalization, right? Even with special education departments. We're trying to fit a large circle into a small box, and guess what? It just isn't working. So let me ask you this. If we continue to teach the way we've always taught, will we get different results? Type your answer below. I'm really curious about this. I do love the that we are able to really like meet the needs of our students in tutoring and do that. It's interesting to me, like when I do talk to some classroom teachers once in a while, that are trying to they're thinking about tutoring online. I often get, but I only know how to teach using the tools that I have, which can be really, really dangerous, right? So Natalie says that she 100% agrees. The government in the UK has just set a law during the weekend that they are getting rid of anti-capitalistic topics, literature from the curriculum, and teachers are outraged right now. Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. Absolutely. And this is actually why when I started my own tutoring, I now had the freedom to use best practices and what I knew I worked. So I learned from reading research like the National Reading Panels report, best practices. I learned from being in this grant called the Reading First grant. And I had taught multiple different programs depending on the schools and all of that kind of stuff that I was at. So I took my best practices from those programs and I began creating personalization that was based on results and data because I wanted to be able to track what was working and what was not working. So this Friday, I'm actually going to be sharing the system that I personally designed that not only gets results, but is much less complicated to learn than approaches like Orton Gillingham or Reading Recovery. And you guys, I have found a way to be able to close that gap a full year with 8 to 12 hours of instruction. So even if the child has a reading disability like dyslexia or low IQ. So if you're interested, I'm going to have Beth put a link inside of the description, but I also have, if you go to the description, there's a link that you can just click on and be able to sign up and be able to join me. Now, I'm interested what you guys think about IQ. Do you feel like the old ways of doing things are going to work in a society where we really need personalization for our students? Or do we need to start changing the way that we instruct? I almost feel like right. When I left the school when we were moving through the RTI movement, that was response to intervention. So it was like you had your classroom instruction. It was like a tier 3 model, right? You had your classroom instruction and then you had interventions for the kids that needed it. And then you had like the special education program and it was like a 3-tiered system. But there's one more layer I feel like that is missing. And that's that last layer of one-to-one instruction because some kids just need one-to-one to be able to figure out what's the gap, what's the problem, and how can I close that. And so we really need a 4-tier model in order to be effective with all students because it is possible to be able to increase the reading level of every single kid that we work with. I have not had one student that I've ever worked with in reading that I've not been able to increase their reading level. Not one. In the entire 10 years that I've been tutoring online. So I think it's really, really important, you guys, to really meet the needs of each of our students and not predetermine what their success. I don't ever ask a parent when I am before I work with them. So what's your child's IQ? Would that be a weird question? I think that would be a really weird question. Have you ever found out what your child's IQ is? I just feel like it's such an old draconian measure. And what if, you guys, what if the amount that you read actually increased your IQ? Like we almost fit like IQ into a box that like, well, this is your IQ, so this is your only hope for the future. And I really think that we need to be more open-minded in using the different strategies for being able to teach kids in the most effective way. And you know what's really exciting? We can do it in an online format. I think that was the thing that most people were most curious when I got started. Like, how in the world do you teach reading online? And I said, well, it's actually really simple. I just share my screen and I use the resources that I have on my computer. And so the child never has to worry about having this resource or that resource. I have all the resources on my side, and then I'm able to go from there. There are so many fun programs now that we can utilize with our reading instruction. And I think that that is so, so cool, right? Because we have everything at the tip of a finger. Kid doesn't understand a word, we can bring up an image, we can have a conversation about it. Kid needs practice with their sight words, we can personalize PowerPoints, we can personalize word lists and play games and do different things so that they can quickly be able to read those words. We can pull up books at the tip of a finger. All we have to do, like if I ever want to download a book from Amazon, I have the book within 30 seconds on my computer. Like that, those kinds of things never happened before. So a kid can actually choose a book that they want to read. I can purchase it and there it is. It's on my computer. Or I can use a program that like Reading A to Z for kids that are in grades kindergarten to a sixth grade reading level, where I'm going to have books that are at guided reading levels that I can slowly increase the difficulty of the books based off of the comprehension level that the child is using and their reading strategies. Unbelievable stuff, you guys, that are available to us. So if you haven't had the opportunity yet to join me for the how to close the reading gap a full year with 8 to 12 hours of instruction, come and join me on Friday. And also on Friday, the Reading Interventionist doors will be opening. So you'll be able to join us and in that program and be able to be guided in how do I not only teach reading online, but how can I do it so that I can close the gap quickly? Because other programs, I know I talked about it at Orton Gillingham last time around. Some people were upset with some of the stuff that I said about Orton Gillingham, but I'm going to be honest, it takes a really long time to close the gap. It was a program that was meant to close the gap 2 years and 1 year. Okay. So it takes a long time for it to close the reading gap. And so we are going to find out how can I double that speed and be able to increase a child's reading level 4 years with just 1 year of instruction. Sound good? Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you guys joined me. We had Lynn Wilson and Natalie in the house. You guys look like you're having a great conversation, which is really, really fun. I love when people get to know each other just a little bit more, which is awesome. Natalie, I love you. Lynn, I love you. And Beth, so glad that you guys were able to join us, and definitely come join us on Friday. And for those of you that are interested in the blogging challenge, it's coming up pretty soon here. So you've gotten a special invite if you signed up for that, and I'll be seeing you guys soon. Enjoy the rest of your day, you guys. Bye.